Just a minute. Still loading up.
Mhm.
It's warm in here, isn't it? Está caliente.
Yeah.
We'll get some water.
Okay. Aaron, how are you doing?
I'm doing
I
good,
don't-
Rabbi. How about you?
I can't complain.
Medio.
Aaron,
¿Está ahí contigo?
entró.
We'll give it another couple minutes, see who else comes in.
So it looks like they finally translated the commentary on the Mishnah to English, huh?
Which commentary?
Safaria translated Mamadi's commentary on the Mishnah. I got an email saying that.
Oh, I didn't notice that. I hadn't read their emails recently. Things have been a little crazy with Pesach, but that's great. Let's actually see what we got here. Hold on.
How helpful is that commentary?
Rambam's?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's all commentary is good, and his commentary is very insightful. It doesn't look like they've got the English up yet for this particular section.
Oh.
Maybe they're working through in different parts. Just
The
a
other thing I was going to
moment.
say is that his is so old, it seems like it'd be part of the USCJ's translations, but they don't cite to him that often.
No, and you know, Rambam really had his own particular agenda. Rambam was not a big fan of the Talmud. He was more inclined to say that I'm just double checking here to see if there was anything that said updates or there we are, the blog. That usually has their updates. He believed that people should be able to read the Mishnah with the right commentary, and then Ramban's commentary on the Torah.
Oh, let me see.
Right, which is incredibly important. But yeah, that is different than Rambam on the Mishnah. So this is Nachmanides, as they point out, his commentary on the Torah is considered to be very essential. Along with Rashi's, it's one of the most commonly cited. And it is also very lengthy. So it is nice that they now have that in English for people that are not able to get through his lengthy and sometimes confusing Hebrew explanations. But that's a Torah commentary. But that is very nice that it's available now. There have been a number of good English translations available in print, but that's the first I've ever seen that's available online. So that's handy. Thanks for drawing my attention to it, even if in a slightly different way than expected. Oh, and Safari is jumping around for me again.
But what were you saying about Rambam's interpretation of the Mishnah? He was trying to what?
Oh, yes. Sorry, thank you. So when you read his introduction, nope, we're on number 5. When you read his introduction to the Mishnah Torah, his whole idea was that Talmud study had become an unnecessary distraction from Jewish life and, most importantly to him, philosophy. That people spent all of their days wrestling with Talmud, when in fact, the answers from Talmud were already settled. Do you do this? Do you do that? We have answers for all of those things. All you should really need to do is know the Mishnah, know the commentary, have his Mishnah Torah, and boom, you should be able to handle your Jewish day-to-day life just fine. And then you now have more time for doing the real mental work of Judaism, which is philosophy, or at least what we would call philosophy in the modern world. It's really more of a combination of philosophy and meditation and conceptualization and shaping of the personal midot, as we would use in more modern terminology. So he really wanted to bypass the Talmud for most people. He did not think it was a worthwhile subject of study for the average Jewish person. The
Right.
Mishnah, yes, and obviously his own books, yes, but the Talmud he thought had gotten way too much attention.
Did he think the Talmud was only for those who wanted to actually adjudicate on issues and the rabbis?
Well, even then, it was unclear whether he thought a person who knew the Mishnah with his commentary and the Mishnah Torah would be able to handle that by themselves, That was one of the criticisms that was leveled against him. I think that he did believe that an actual judge should still know the Talmud, but it's not 100% clear.
Because he went to great lengths to update Jewish halacha to make it easier for the merchants, right? I actually just read a book on this.
Well, I mean, it's not a question of update, because that implies a certain arc of progress, which I don't think was Rambam's bent. But as far as interpreting it in a way that clarified it in a means that matched the local situation, which might have been more favorable to the local merchants, yes, that was certainly something that he or any rabbi was usually doing.
I thought, did he update to like allow business transactions on Yom Tov?
I'd have to go back and look at the specific rulings that he took. Believe it or not, I haven't memorized every ruling of his or of the other rabbis over the different course of 2,000 years.
Shame on you, Rabbi. Shame on you.
I know. I will say it was one of my favorite classes when I was at Machon Schechter in Israel was when we studied Jewish law development, and we took different topics and we saw the arc of how they developed over a couple thousand years. It was an amazing class and an amazing topic, and something that I really enjoy, but it is very, very hard because unless you need that information, halacha l'maaseh, the practical day-to-day halacha, is usually mostly settled, and you don't have to go back and review what was the opinion 1,000 years ago.
Rabbi, before you move on, okay, if we are talking about generality,
Yes.
it's a problem with the Daf Yomi. It's not the same. It's very difficult to study Daf Yomi because none of the sources is a good one, not at the same level as we used to with Sepharia, and I feel like it's not the same. And the one place that I found that they are translating very good, very complete, but for some reason they are going five days behind. So I don't know if you can find another solution, another place.
I'll look again, but yeah, I mean, because it is Yerushalmi, because it is Shekalim, it's not very widely studied. I'm not surprised that you're not finding good resources on it. So but I'll look again and see what I can find.
Why there's not a Babli version of Shekalim?
So again, we may be getting a little off topic for Mishnah, but hopefully people are interested enough to hear.
It's Torah. It's Limud Torah.
Exactly. So the Yerushalmi in general deals with halacha that was more relevant, especially in this particular section, to the land of Israel and the practices in Eretz Yisrael. The Bavli, because it was written outside the land of Israel, does not. So, for example, all of the sections in the Yerushalmi that deal with the Mishnah regarding the agricultural principles, the whole first section of the Mishnah, really we just go from brachot and then jump all the way to the holiday section, the next setter of the Mishnah. So the Bavli was really very focused on what do we need to do here in Bavli, what do we understand in general, and Shekalim was not a big topic for them. However, and this part I don't know, when the printers were putting together the printed text of the Bavli, they included Shekalim for some reason. And that I have not...
Included or included?
Included. All the other sections they left out, or they left only the Mishnah, but they didn't include the Yerushalmi discussion. But for some reason, and again, I haven't come across an explanation of this, and if anyone happens to hear a good one, please share it. They added in the printed text of the Bavli, in the modern version that we have, they added this section. Now, you know, on one part of me says that it was the pet project of the printer, and he really liked that section. Another part of me says the printer wanted to round out the page numbers and found this as a way to pad the book. Another part of me says this was a tradition in one community, and that was just why they did it. Or we'll never know. But once it happened, now that it's there, everybody expects to see it. And that, that's a question sometimes of printing traditions. There are many things that we do now in our Siddur that were established because printers made choices, not because the rabbis made choices, but because the printers did. And once it's on the page, everybody feels this is it. We're done.
The Haggadah.
Exactly. Like the Haggadah, exactly, from Pesach.
Yeah.
Once it's been printed, there's no way to change it, no way to not do it. The only thing you can do is maybe add, but you could never ever delete. And that's, Jews, we have a deep respect for the printed word. We do respect books and respect the wisdom that is printed in them, but sometimes we over apply it in places where it's not appropriate.
Hey, but Rabbi, I know in the Mishnah, doesn't sometimes the Beratah, some of them get so connected to a certain portion of, I know for in the Mishnah, some sections that they just started adding them when they printed the versions, like you said, but they're related and they supplement and they're pretty much accepted. So they just kind of add them in.
Right. So if a Braita or a Tosefta is very, very relevant, there are places where those have jumped the tracks and they get included. But again, that was because they were accepted, they were expected, and then once they are expected, now they cannot be removed.
What surprised me, Rabbi, in the first 10 Rakim from Shkalim, that is it's the same as we saw, like it's not only about Israel, because they are dealing with money for the Beit HaMikdash, as the same way that we saw in others, Masechot is the same. So until now, I don't see why there's not a Bavli one, because it's about the Beit HaMikdash, how to do, how to finance the Beit HaMikdash and everything. And if we are planning to build a third one, that's important, relevant information.
It is. But there is a general trend in Jewish law codes towards minimizing information. So when you go back to the Mishnah, of course, it covers everything. Now, does it cover in as much detail as we want? No, that's why we need to keep explaining it, but that was intentional. Then the Yerushalmi covers the whole Mishnah, but the Bavli covers less than the whole Mishnah. And then Rambam comes along and distills it down a little bit more. And then Shulchan Aruch comes along based off the Tur and says, actually, we don't even need all of the other stuff that the Mishnah Torah talks about, all the stuff that's about the Beit HaMikdash and those things, we can drop that. And then you get things like the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which basically just takes Or HaChaim, the first part of Shulchan Aruch, and then only covers that and then adds their own stringencies. So it's like you end up with a smaller and smaller slice of Judaism, but you end up often with more and more text about that one slice. I like to say that the amount of commentary and information expands to fill the book, regardless of what you've got in it. So if you're only going to talk about Shabbat, you'll still end up with a 500-page book. If you were going to talk about Shabbat and the other holidays, it would still be a 500-page book.
True, actually true. But it's very interesting because for what you explained, for me, it's counterintuitive because it's like they lost the faith and the hope to build another Beit HaMikdash. Because leaving keeping everything related to Beit HaMikdash out, it's saying, you know what, we gave up, we never would need this again. And it's going against all our praying every day and everything that is about the Judaism today.
It is very possible. The other thing that I could imagine of why they might leave it out, though, was the politics of Bavli were very different. The Reish Galuta, the head of the Jewish community in the diaspora, in the Babylonian community, was a secular position. It was not a rabbinic position. And there were often times when there was friction between the rabbis and the secular authority, the Jewish secular authority. And there may have been arguments about how to fund the community and who gets to collect which money and where that money goes. So it might not have been able to be talked about because of pressure from within the Jewish community itself.
That's a good point. That they want to be sure that the money doesn't go to Israel, but stay in Babel.
Or goes to the Reish Galuta rather than to the rabbis. There are so many different practical, to use a bad word, concerns that might have been involved in that discussion. But it is interesting. And if anyone comes across other teachings about why shkalim wasn't picked up and why it was added back into the printed versions of the Babli, I'd be very interested to hear.
But I like your theory. It's a very interesting one.
Well, we're both political science majors, of course.
Master degree. don't underestimate me, please. I have a master degree on that.
Never. All right, so let's get back to eunuchs. So we're going to get back to the topic of eunuchs, and I want to remind you that there are two different types, right? There is the eunuch of the sun, here translated as sexually underdeveloped, and then there is the eunuch of man, or of humanity, meaning somebody that was turned into a eunuch after birth. So we're talking here in this sexually underdeveloped, we're talking about the sun eunuch. We're talking about somebody that has never been able to have children. So you can refer back to the last week's class if you want more information about that. All right. A sexually underdeveloped man does not perform chalitza or enter into levirate marriage with his Yevamot. All right. So
where are you?
Oh, sorry. We are on Mishnah 8. Chapter 8, Mishnah 5.
I have a different beginning. I have Enoch does not submit to chalitza and he does not perform ibum.
No, that's the same.
No, you say underperform.
No, so sexually underdeveloped is this translation's version of saris.
Oh, okay.
So what this translation is trying to do, which is different than some others that I've seen, is rather than saying that this is the saris chama, the sun eunuch, it's trying to use the implication, which is that the sun eunuch is a person who never was able to be able to have children. So it's just the translator trying to help us understand the meaning of the word rather than the literal word. And then, the idea of submitting to chalitza or to do yibum, that's just different ways to put that into English, right? Because yes, the reason why it's submit versus perform is technically the man does not perform chalitza. Technically, the woman performs chalitza on the man. So he has to submit for her to do that. But this translation is using the shorthand of saying, look, he's the one who says, I'm not going to marry you. So he initiates the process, even if she's the one doing the sandals. Okay. So if you are this kind of eunuch, then you cannot do chalitza and you cannot get into levirate marriage. And this is something we saw in last week's last Mishnah. And similarly, a sexually underdeveloped woman, also known as an ilonit, who is incapable of bearing children, does not perform chalitza or enter into levirate marriage with her yavam. So the idea for both of them is that the Torah itself says that the purpose of doing yibum, the purpose of doing levirate marriage, is so that they will bear children. Well, if you can't bear children, then you're not eligible for the ritual. You're not eligible for levirate marriage. And if you're not eligible for levirate marriage at all, then you also don't have to do chalitza. There's no reason to do the ceremony of chalitza. So if either he or she are unable to have children in this particular way, then you do not do chalitza and you don't do yibum. If a sexually underdeveloped man performed chalitza with his Yevamah, meaning if he did it anyway, right? He wasn't supposed to because he is this type of saris, this type of eunuch, but he went ahead and did chalitza with her anyway. He didn't ask the rabbi, they just did the ceremony. He has not thereby disqualified her from marrying into the priesthood, as his chalitza is invalid. You may remember from earlier in the Masechet that if a woman is divorced, that she is not allowed to marry a Kohen, she's not allowed to marry a priest, and that chalitza for that purpose counts as though she were divorced. So a woman who went through chalitza is unable to marry a Kohen. However, because his chalitza had no legal standing, because it never needed to be done in the first place, and in fact shouldn't have been done, therefore he has not changed her status, and she could marry a Kohen if she wanted to after this. Make sense? Okay. Part 2. However, if he had intercourse with her, he has disqualified her. Right? If he not only if he said, I'm going to do yibum and therefore I'm going to take you as my wife, and they had sex, because it is possible for certain types of unification, for becoming a eunuch, certain types of castration, for the man to still engage in sex. If it happened, she now cannot get married to a Kohen. She cannot get married to a priest. Why? This is because it is considered licentious sexual intercourse, what's known as bilat znut. Licentious being the fancy word for saying it wasn't for a proper reason. Judaism has no problem with husband and wife having intercourse in lots of ways that are pleasurable to the two of them, but Judaism is not a fan of people doing that outside of being married. And for the Kohanim in particular, there were rules about a woman who engaged in such behavior not being allowed to marry a Kohen, that she would be considered an inappropriate wife for the Kohen. So since such intercourse does not fulfill the mitzvah of levirate marriage and is therefore categorized as forbidden relations with one's sister-in-law, now it is considered to be just licentious intercourse, and thus they are not allowed to marry into the priesthood. Does everyone follow that logic? Okay.
Hey, Rabbi.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, how come the intercourse doesn't count as a marriage potentially?
Because he cannot marry his brother's sister.
That's right. I forgot about that.
That's okay. It's a good reminder. There are a lot of moving parts in levirate marriage. It's one of the reasons why, in case you're wondering 8 chapters in, why did Rabbi Neely pick this as something to study? One of the reasons I picked it is because of all the moving parts that have connections to human relations in particular, but also legal concepts in general. It is a good Masechet to try and study. However, because it has so many moving parts that are related to so many different concepts, it is a difficult section to study. So yes, that doesn't count as just getting married normally, because you're not normally allowed to marry your brother's widow. Okay, and similarly, with regard to a sexually underdeveloped woman, the Ilonit, if one of the brothers performed chalitza with her, he has not disqualified her from marrying into the priesthood. Like we said before, the chalitza should not have been done because she's not eligible to get married under Yibum anyway. So therefore, it doesn't count as chalitza. Therefore, it doesn't count as a pseudo-divorce. Therefore, she can still get married to a Kohen. However, if he had intercourse with her, he has disqualified her because the intercourse is considered licentious sexual intercourse, like we just discussed. One thing I do want you to recognize is that it is not impossible for the woman to get married. She is allowed to get married even though she is an Ilonit, even though she is undeveloped. The man has a more difficult situation because of the rules we talked about regarding those parts of the body, and it gets much more complicated. But a woman who is infertile is a perfectly acceptable marriage partner under Jewish law. Now, there are many authorities who say that the husband needs to have already fulfilled the mitzvah of Pur Revu, of being fruitful and multiplying. He needs to already have children, or have a second wife who is able to have children. But you are allowed, and there is nothing wrong or shameful about marrying a woman that is infertile. Judaism, yes, treats fertility as a very important concept because of our connection to the next generation and our love of children, but it is not something that puts a woman permanently outside the realm of marriage.
So, Rabbi,
yes,
in today's world, they would have to marry somebody who already has children?
So in today's world, because of the multiple options we have for additional ways of procreation, whether it be any one of the various IVF treatments or even by some authorities adoption, most people would have no problem marrying a woman who was an Ilonit to a husband, even if he didn't have children yet.
So adoption counts for most of the conservative movement?
Yes,
Or
within the
Orthodox?
conservative movement, definitely. Within some of the Orthodox, yes. It is, you know, just an interesting aside. The status of orphans in the biblical world was very different because of how the inheritance law worked and because of how orphaning worked, if that's the verb, about how somebody becomes an orphan. Unlike the modern world where foundlings or children that are put up for adoption very anonymously is more the norm, in the ancient world, you would generally know who the parents were of an orphan. You know, your neighbor died in a flood or a fire or a famine, disease, and the community would then take care of their children. So that was the standard practice. So it wasn't like you had anonymous children that were being adopted that nobody knew who their families were. So that meant that orphans in the biblical world and even in the time of the Mishnah, the orphans had a lineage. The orphans had parents. Yes, their parents were deceased, but you knew who they were, you knew their legacy, and thus you knew their inheritance. And the laws of taking care of that inheritance on their behalf were very strict. It's only been more recently that Judaism has now found itself able in our modern society to adopt people that are true foundlings with no background, no history, no way of tracking that history, and thus bringing them fully into the family has been a very important step in the modern world.
But Rabbi, a lot of the adoption today, you know who the parents are, though.
So a lot of the adoption today, you might know who the parents are. I don't know that you can say that the adopting family knows who the parents are. Sometimes the organization, yes, but not always the people that are doing the adopting. And often not the child won't know who their parents were. And under most, at least American systems that I've seen, a child that is given up for adoption, the parents sever all legal connection to that child, and the child has no legal claim on the parents who put them up for adoption, meaning that they cannot inherit, for example. So yes, it's a more complicated, nuanced situation, which is why I said it is an aside. And one of our other students just also sent me a chat to a link regarding another way to handle this sort of issue, which is a concubinage, a second wife for the purposes of procreation. It's not common, which is why it made the news, but it is technically an option in some places, in some communities. All right, let's move on to Mishnah 6, and we will finish chapter 9. And this one's going to be unusual. So prepare yourself. If a priest who is a eunuch by natural causes, right? That's that same undeveloped translation from before, married an Israelite woman, he enables her to eat truma. So the principle that that's trying to be raised here is that he was born in that status of being impaired in that way, and he marries a regular Israelite woman who normally would not be allowed to eat truma. The question is, does she get truma or not? Because normally you would expect it to be a full marriage. In this particular case, he cannot truly consummate the marriage depending upon the status of his body. So what is her status vis-a-vis the eating of the truma? And the answer is she is allowed to eat the truma. All right, that part's simple. Now it gets complicated.
Rabbi, so that was very convenient for an Israeli to marry a priest because the food quality will increase. Correct?
Depends on which generation you were
sociologically, okay.
Right. There were generations when the Kohanim were well taken care of by the population, and there were generations when they weren't. It depended on the which generation in Jewish history we were talking about. But yes, on average, the Kohanim often had easier access to slightly better food than the average Israelite.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon say, new topic, if a priest who is a hermaphrodite. Now, hermaphrodites, the English term, the Hebrew term actually comes from the Greek, which is to be androgynous. So a hermaphrodite or an androgynous person means they possess both male and female genitalia, that they have both parts to their body, one person, but two sets, if you will. And this is a rare but natural occurrence that does happen. So if there is a Kohen who is born with this status, and he then marries an Israelite woman, he enables her to eat truma. Now, I should point out that that's the short answer. The longer answer in the Gemara, in the Talmud, is actually not exactly. So they go through and they analyze Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon's position and the other positions of the other sages, and they come up with the definition that this hermaphrodite, the androgynous, is a category by himself, meaning he doesn't count as a male or female directly, and therefore he can't get married directly. Therefore, he, the Kohen, can still eat the truma, but because his marriage is not a standard marriage, his wife would not be able to eat the truma. Okay, everyone following that? Okay.
Rabbi, who can't eat the truma again? The Aphrodite?
No, the wife.
I thought if they had both parts, so they were treated as a male for the most part.
Well, yeah, that's the best phrase of putting it, for the most part. So yes, the specific status of the androgynous is very complicated in Jewish law. By default, they are generally treated as male, but it is not categorically so in all cases. And like I said, there's a much longer discussion in the Talmud on this particular part that talks about how in the end of the analysis, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon's opinion, as stated here, is not the last word, but instead, although the androgynous is still allowed to eat from the truma, the wife is not. I should point out, by the way, I'm using the terminology as found here in the text because it is the terminology that's been used as translations. I know some of these terms have taken on more loaded political connotations in the modern world. but I'm going to stick with the classical translations. This is not me weighing into any modern topics. This is me just trying to explain how the rabbis in the Mishnah and the Talmud handled these particular issues in this narrow zone.
How is it possible that a wife can't eat teruma?
How is it possible?
Well, I mean, it's the wife. She should be connected to the husband, or at least within the husband's household, and therefore should be allowed to eat teruma. It seems like the only way she wouldn't be allowed to eat teruma would be if the marriage was invalid.
Well, and that is the difficult part here, right? That can you really say that he is male or is female? And because of the doubt, there is then doubt on the marriage. And because there is doubt on the marriage, there is doubt on her right to the truma. There is doubt on whether or not she is actually 100% married. And since the laws of eating truma are so strict, the rabbis err on the side of caution by saying, since there is doubt and the doubt has not been removed, therefore, she cannot eat from the truma.
But then how come they let the marriage stand?
Because there is doubt.
No, the marriage does stand though, right?
I know but that's my point. Because there is doubt. Right? There is enough doubt not to invalidate the marriage, but there is not enough doubt to authorize the eating of truma.
But I thought for the most part he should be they're treating him like a man though.
Right? Until it conflicts with another Torah principle that requires a higher degree of certainty.
Right.
It's complicated. That's kind of my my ongoing theme on this topic, and the rabbis themselves agree that this topic is complicated, which is also one of the reasons why in the modern world I get so frustrated when people treat this or other gender issues as somehow being so simple and obvious that it can be reduced to a bumper sticker or worse, a shouted slogan. These things are not simple. They never have been. They never will be. And we need to make sure that we deal with them and most importantly, the people with great care. Moving on to the opposite situation, which is where we're going to see a tumtum. So the tumtum in the Mishnah terminology is a person who was born which did not display any sexual organs. This is a condition where the skin is often going over the top of where the sexual organs will be found. And as we'll see, it is sometimes possible to open the skin there and reveal what actual genitalia are found inside. Again, rare, natural occurrence, but the rabbis had to account for it.
So for the halakha, they could like do an operation to each dum and see which gender they have, and apply the halakha by whatever they saw.
Well, hold on. Now we're going to see how we treat this.
Oh, okay.
So Rabbi Yehuda says, if a tumtum whose external sexual organs are indeterminate, you can't tell at birth what gender they have, what plumbing they have, if you will, was torn, meaning opened up so that his genitals were exposed, and he was found to be a male, he must not perform chalitza because he is treated like a eunuch. So Rabbi Yehuda's opinion here is that he is treated like a eunuch because his condition at the point of birth was not sufficient. It was not obvious.
Yeah.
However, the halakha does not follow Rabbi Yehuda on this point.
Really?
Yep. As is often the case when Rabbi Yehuda states an opinion by himself, even though he was the editor of the Mishnah, his opinion is often not the final word on the topic. All right, and now we get back into another qualification regarding marriage. The hermaphrodite, that was the androgynous, having both male and female genitalia obvious, may marry a woman, but he may not be married by a man, as he is considered a man. So the idea would be that if you have both genitalia, that the male part can be used with a female, but the female part may not be but the androgynous may not be taken by a man. Now,
So he has both genders, but is considered more a male.
more often than not, he is considered a man. However, I want to point out that Rabbi Eliezer says, let me get this out first. If one had intercourse with a hermaphrodite, he is liable to receive punishment of stoning, the usual punishment for this on his account, as if he had had relations with a male. However, the halakha goes through and says, while he cannot marry a man, the androgynous, if he does have intercourse with a man through his female apparatus, then he is not subject to the death penalty, because it is still forbidden relations, but it is not done male to male. A reminder that the rabbis of the Mishnah were talking about a society and a situation where male to male monogamous romantic love was not known as a thing. And the only form of male to male relationships that they were familiar with were ones like in the Greek and Roman world, which involved domination and exploitation of a heterosexual male onto what would have been presumably a heterosexual male partner that was subjected to it, or were engaging purely in fun, but each were still primarily attracted to women and would be most likely to be married to women as well. So there's a lot to be said about the status of homosexuality in the modern world, for which I'll reference you to Rabbi Dorf's and Niven's wonderful and very lengthy tshuva, but that is a whole nother conversation.
So, Rabbi,
you say that Rabbi Yehuda lost. So what is the halakha lema'aseh for the tumtum?
That if he displays as male, that he is treated as male.
Okay.
Rabbi. Yes.
I had a question. Just like I said, in the last chapter, we went over the doubt on why they cannot eat teruma because there's doubt. But if there's doubt, how come you can't? How come they can still put him to death if there's doubt?
Well, there isn't doubt. They definitely performed an action, if you will. An action,
but it's not necessarily male on male.
Well, and that's why if there was, what do you call it? If there was male to female penetration, that it doesn't count as actual forbidden intercourse in the strict Torah definition. It would only be if it was male to male apparatus being used. So the rabbis, in terms of whether or not it counted as that form of forbidden relation that the Torah was talking about, were very focused not on the identity of the person, but on the apparatus being used, on the equipment, if you will, not the person using the equipment.
So in the case of the tumtum, if he found to be a male, he can't submit for chalitza. He can do chalitza.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. Chapter 9. So chapter 9 is going to continue with our discussion of who is permitted and forbidden in some complicated ways. In this case, that are not generally focused on the body parts, if you will, but instead are focused more on the relationships. Now, some of these are ones we've already covered, but as Kahati in his commentary points out, it's not unusual for the Mishnah to give a general summary of some of the points and then include and fill in a few of the blanks of some of the parallel or perpendicular cases. So if you were playing along with a pad and pencil, you'd want to be making a 4x4 grid, because you're going to see we have a sort of 4x4 category that we'll deal with. So let's go ahead and get the general topic down, we should at least be able to get through the first Mishnah of chapter 9. We'll see if we can go further than that tonight.
Rabbi, sorry, one more question.
That's okay.
You spoke, I don't want to stop you, but you say that the gender go by the sexual apparatus, not the sexual identity.
No, the activity of intercourse was measured by the apparatus used.
Activity, intercourse. Okay.
Right.
Now, what happened if the apparatus internal say something, but they create an apparatus external that has a different gender? You go by the apparatus internal or external?
Okay. So this is a topic we can't get into tonight because the Mishnah had no idea that it would ever be possible to change the physical apparatus of a person. The Mishnah knew that there was an androgynous person. They knew that there was a tumtum. They knew that there were sarisim, that there were eunuchs, but they never imagined that there would be the medical technology to be able to change the apparatus that a person was equipped with when they were born. So that has meant a lot of study, head scratching, and investigation in the modern world, and still a great deal of debate, at least within the conservative movement. Obviously, the reform movement doesn't debate, they just decree. And obviously, within the Orthodox world, they don't debate, they just decree. They decree the opposite direction. But in the conservative movement, there are still many opinions on that particular topic. And they run the range that you might expect of the apparatus that a person has is the apparatus they have. If they change the apparatus, then they change. And then there are others that are more focused on the gender or sex assigned at birth. And then there are some, although a small minority, that would say that the identity is more important than the apparatus, full stop. But there is still an ongoing debate exactly how to handle this in the modern world, because we've only had a few years, relative to Jewish history, to deal with that particular medical possibility.
Rabbi, do you know any rabbi that did and is an expert that maybe we can have a lecture in adult education about this, that all the gender culture through the halacha?
So it depends. I know rabbis that have very clear and well-argued positions. If you mean somebody who has studied the range of opinions, but is not has not settled on a particular answer, that I don't know. I don't know anyone who has approached this purely academically, rather than trying to find an actual halachic answer to these questions.
Academically, in order to arrive to an halachic decision.
Oh, well, I mean, all the rabbis in the conservative movement who have tried to arrive at halachic decisions do so using the process of halakha. They go back and they review all of the literature for all of these topics of the tumtum and the androgynous and the eunuchs and all of that. They go back and they review all of those topics and then catalog how they've been understood and then use them as the foundation with their reasoning to how it should apply to the modern world. They just reach different conclusions.
Can you maybe later, if you know the contact information, send me contact information so I can contact the person that you recommend me maybe to bring to Temple Israel for a lecture, adult education about this topic?
Yes, let me. I'll try and see who might be a suitable match after the class. Well, after the class and after dinner.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
No problem. No, I mean, it would be nice to have somebody who is an expert in this, because as you can imagine, it is a very uncommon topic in Jewish law for 3,000 years. And all of a sudden in the last 20 years, really, although the history of the medicine and the surgery goes back a bit further, all of a sudden it became possible and still very rare. Unlike, for example, IVF treatment, which is also something very novel. And so there are not that many people that are very well versed in all of the different pieces of information scattered across Jewish law. So let me see what I can come up with.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. I think we still have enough time to at least try doing number one. All right. There are women who are permitted to their husbands and forbidden to the Yevamim, meaning their brother-in-law, while others are permitted to their Yevamim and forbidden to their husbands. Certain women are permitted both to these and to those, meaning both their husbands and their brother-in-law, and others are forbidden to both these and to those, meaning they shouldn't be married to their husband or their brother-in-law. All right, so this is a very typical Mishnah outline where you basically say you could have A and B, you could have A or B, you could have not A but B, and you could have not A nor B. And we're going to go through these over the next couple Mishnayot. But we're going to go ahead and start with the first category. And these are cases of women who are permitted to their husbands and forbidden to their Yevamim. Right? So this means it's a woman who was perfectly fine being married to who she's married to, but is not allowed, once he dies, to do Yibum, to get married to her brother-in-law. And let me just scroll my screen. Okay. Case number one is the case of a common priest who married a widow, right? A regular common priest is allowed to marry a widow, not a divorcee in the times of the Mishnah, but they could marry a widow. And he has a brother who is the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. Now, the widow who was permitted to her husband is forbidden to her Yavam, as it is prohibited for the high priest to marry a widow. So in this case, it was perfectly fine for her to be married to her husband, but when he dies, the high priest cannot marry a widow, which means they cannot do Yibum in that case. Example number two. The same is true in the case of a priest disqualified due to a flawed lineage, meaning a halal. For example, the son of a priest and a divorcee. So it means the father got married to a divorcee, which he wasn't supposed to. And when he does that, it impinges on his status, his lineage, which renders him as halal. And now he...
What was halal, sorry?
A halal in this case means a child born to a priest, but from a union that, while valid, is not valid for a priest. Like in this case, a priest marrying a divorcee.
And Rabbi, the marriage is valid, right?
Yes. So the priest and the divorcee are allowed to be married. That is technically fine.
So if it's a convert you married, is that a valid marriage?
It usually for the Kohanim, no.
That marriage would be invalid. It wouldn't make you a halal. It would make you.
I'm sorry. Do you mean this? The actual? Does it tofes? Is it does it have standing? Does it remain?
Right.
Sorry. I'd have to go back and double check that. I believe that it does.
Because I know that's been a big issue with this ultra orthodox in recent times, right?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, the issues of who a Kohen can marry in the modern world has been very problematic. Now, I should point out that the conservative movement, arguing that the current status of the Kohanim is not relevant because of the lack of temple service, and because our eschatology, our end of days belief is that who is a valid and who isn't a valid priest will be sorted out at that time. We do allow priests to get married to divorcees, to converts, and such. It's a more complicated issue. The information is available on the Rabbinical Assembly website under the Jewish law section if you want to read more. But we do perform these marriages, or at least most conservative rabbis will.
And back then, if they got married, the marriage stand. You said you weren't sure if the marriage stands or not.
I'm not sure, but I believe that it does.
Yes. All right. Thanks.
So what does mean a fit? A halal means the priests that marry and divorcee one converts, correct?
No, the halal in this case, in this case, we're not talking about the husband and wife. We're talking about the son.
So who married a fit? What was a fit?
So it means married a woman who in all other ways would be fine to marry a Kohen. So she's a regular, never been divorced, never been converted in the biblical time. She's just a normal girl. Right? So you have the son who is halal because of his father's decision of wife, and he marries a regular woman who could marry a priest under normal circumstances, but now she's married this guy. And he, meaning the son, the guy who is impinged, he has a brother who is a priest fit for service. Now, how would this happen? Very simple. Maybe the first wife of the father was a regular woman, and the first brother, or the second brother in our story, was from that wife. And then she died. The priest remarries, but he remarries a divorcee, and now he has another son. So imagine these two brothers are half brothers sharing the father, but different mother. Okay. That woman, meaning the woman married to the son, the first son, who is halal, she is permitted to marry the halal. Nothing wrong with her marrying him, but she is forbidden to his brother. Even though if she had gotten married to the second brother first, there would be no problem. Because she is married to him, she has engaged in intercourse with a halal, and she is rendered a halalah, which means a woman disqualified from marrying a priest. So her status becomes connected to the status of her first husband. So when he dies, she is not allowed to marry the brother.
Hey, Rabbi.
Yes.
I know this comes later on, but how come sometimes you lose the status of your husband upon death and sometimes you don't?
It's complicated. It depends on the status of many other things going on. So like you said, why don't we save that for later on? Let's finish up with our examples here. Another example, this is example number 3, if you're keeping score, is the case of an Israelite of unflawed lineage, just regular guy, and who is married to an Israelite woman of similar lineage, regular girl, and he, the husband, has a brother who is a son born of an incestuous or adulterous relationship, what we would call a mamzer. Right? So again, we're talking about a half-brother in this case, and normally a half-brother by the same father would still be required to do levirate. You don't have to be a full brother to do levirate, but in this case, because the second brother is a mamzer, the woman is not allowed to marry him, and therefore she is permitted to the first brother, but not the second. Fourth example, or a mamzer who married a daughter born from an incestuous or adulterous relationship, a mamzeret, and he has a brother who is an Israelite of unflawed lineage. Right? In that case, the roles are reversed, meaning the brother has, the mamzer has married a mamzeret, which is allowed. Mamzerim can marry each other, but this half-brother, who is an Israelite without the issue, cannot then marry the woman, the widow, in Yibum, because he is not allowed to marry a mamzeret. So, as it says, a mamzer is permitted to marry a mamzeret, but neither is permitted to a Jew of unflawed lineage. So, in each of these cases, these women are permitted to their husbands. The first marriages are legal, but they are forbidden to their Yevamim. They are forbidden to their brother-in-law, so they can't do Yibum. Okay? Okay. And we're going to do the other 3 categories next week. That is to say, permitted to the brother, but not permitted to their actual husband, and permitted to both, and forbidden to both. We'll be tackling those next week.
All right. Thanks, Rabbi.
Rabbi,
All
Thank
right,
you,
Hod
Rabbi.
Simcha.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Have a
I
good rest
enjoy
of
your
the
meal.
Pesach.
Yevamot.
Thank you. And I'll get that extra information to you, Natan.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Take care, everyone. Be well.
You too. Bye.